Hi everybody, welcome to my channel again. This is Peter speaking. You're watching Thailand Bound, and if you've arrived here by accident, I talk about all things Thailand. Today I'm going to be reading out two viewers' true stories, two people who visited Thailand and their experiences, and as usual I'm not going to waste any time and I'm going to get straight into the first story.
สวัสดีค่ะ
Many people forget that we were all newbies in Thailand at one time. This story is my memories of when I was a newbie. I'm a seasoned traveller now, but my first time to Thailand was a roller coaster ride that I wouldn't pay to go on again. I'll give you some background. First, I had just turned 50 at the time, living in the UK, and was going through a divorce. I had been married for 25 years and had had a daughter who was now 22. I didn't really want to be single again at 50, but my wife had been unfaithful to me, so I felt I had no choice other than a divorce. I was emotionally vulnerable, but really wasn't aware of it at the time, which was to play a decisive role in a couple of months. I'd never been to Thailand or Asia, so I researched and made arrangements online to stay at a hotel in Pattaya, which was not far from the beach and was located in Naklua, which is in the north of Pattaya and not the main beach road. I looked on a Thai dating site, something I had never considered before, but it is difficult to be alone when you have been married for so many years. I messaged 3 women from the first 5 pages I looked at and received just one reply from a lady who apparently had never been married and was aged 32. The lady told me that she was working in a graphic design company in Pattaya, owned a car and was a Buddhist. We continued to chat on WhatsApp and learned more and more about each other on a daily basis. We sent pictures and I explained my situation. The lady's name was Nang and she seemed genuine enough. She sent me photographs of her at temples, at work, in the car and wearing her uniform, etc. Nang also told me that she was the head of accounting in the company that she worked for. Our conversations focused on what her plans were. I didn't really know what mine were. We discussed her work, spoke about temples and a little about her family back home in another part of Thailand. It was about 2 days before my flight home and I hadn't heard from Nang at our usual times of messaging, so I continued to wait for her to hear from her in the UK. I did not want to call her in case she was working or busy with her family. Anyway, eventually at 6 p.m. her time in Thailand, which was midday in the UK, I got a message from Nang saying she had been in a car accident. I felt a bit panicky because I didn't know the severity, but after about an hour, Nang had messaged me and told me that she was in hospital. Not badly hurt though. I had her phone number, although we had only ever spoke once because her English wasn't very good, as opposed to her text messages, which had gotten better thanks to Google Translate. Nang said something about money but passed the phone over to someone who apparently was a doctor who could speak English. He said Nang was shy but asked if I could help with any medical bills. I knew she got salary at the end of the month, which at that time just happened to be the very next day. I had told Nang previously that I was planning another trip to Thailand on August the 2nd. The doctor told me that Nang said she would pay me back all of the money when I returned to Thailand. As I mentioned at the beginning of this story, I was emotionally vulnerable at the time and didn't suspect anything, so I sent Nang 50,000 baht that she asked me for, truly believing that she intended to pay me back when I returned to Thailand. Nang was very thankful and said her sister had picked the money up from a bank near to the hospital. It was then that she stunned me with a question. She asked me if I could still father children. This kind of threw me off balance a bit. I guess so, I told her. I really want a baby, she said. I thought maybe she had had a bigger bang on the head from the accident than I had originally thought, so I didn't say much more about it. I asked her to get some rest and we'd talk later. Our next messaging session was about having children again. I just said that I was 50 years old and having a baby was the last thing on my mind. She seemed dejected and I felt a bit sad at how blunt I'd replied, so I added that I wasn't against having one, I just didn't think it was the first thing on my mind. I really want to see you, she said. I was infatuated with Nang back then. I just didn't know it. I arrived back in Bangkok mid-afternoon and had arranged to meet up with Nang. I'd arranged for a short 3-day holiday to Koh Samui and we would be flying around 8:30 a.m. the next day. Nang had arranged to have some days off work, so we had agreed to meet at my hotel and have some dinner. Nang arrived at my hotel at about 7 p.m. in a newish white Toyota pickup truck. We had dinner together and it was now 10 p.m. The plan had been that Nang would go home after dinner and return back in the morning. Nang told me that she wanted to stay at my hotel rather than having to drive home and back again in the morning. I told her that I had only a double bed, so I suggested that I sleep on the floor. Nang didn't say anything. Nang left her ID at reception, which is normal procedure in all hotels in Thailand. After a few minutes, we were in my room. My room was kind of small but comfortable. I was thinking about our sleeping arrangements when Nang said to me that she wanted me to spend the night with her in one bed. Believe it or not, I was actually quite shy at the time. However, nature took its course and we were both okay with it in the end. The next morning, we flew to Koh Samui where we had a nice 3-day holiday. I'd forgotten all about the 50,000 baht that I had sent to Nang, but she brought it up and I told her to consider it a gift. I then checked where she got injured and saw the small cut was healing on the top of her head. I asked her about the car, but she said it had been fixed the next day. Holiday over, Nang went back to work. We had agreed to meet the following evening, but Nang had a little surprise. She had brought some clothes and toiletries so that she could stay at the hotel with me. This came as a bit of a shock to me because we hadn't discussed anything about Nang moving into my hotel, but then I also liked the idea. This arrangement went on for about a week. It was quite nice. She'd go to work in the day and I'd explore the local area. Nang told me one night out of the blue that she was pregnant. I was in total shock and told her that I wanted to see for myself. So we brought a test kit from a local pharmacy. She did the test and it came back negative. Relieved is an understatement. The next day, Nang was acting a little strange, so I asked her what was wrong. She said she didn't think she'd done the test properly and that she wanted to do another one. So I told her I would help her do the test properly. We did the test for a second time and this time it all came back positive. Nang didn't ask me anything but put plans into action. She planned a visit to her parents' home, a wedding, photos and a visit to a female doctor. We must get married and we must go doctor now, she said. Things were moving very fast and I just went along with the flow. The female doctor spoke excellent English. She gave Nang an ultrasound scan and on seeing the results said that the baby was about 6 weeks old. Nang didn't react at all. Maybe she didn't understand the implications of this news, but I did. I persisted with a question and asked Nang, well, I've only been here since August the 2nd, so are you sure the scan has given the baby's age correctly? She replied that it will be more positive the following month, but given the measurements, yes, she thought the baby to be about 6 weeks old. I questioned Nang about the baby's age, but she didn't understand my concerns. The next day, after 11 hours of driving, we had reached Nang's home, which was in a province, and although it was night time, it was clear to me that this area was very basic, with wooden shacks, dogs roaming free and nobody speaking English, which I found out later. When the car eventually stopped, I was utterly shocked to see about 100 people standing there waiting to greet us. I didn't know what to expect as we got out of the car. These people started patting me on the back. There was Thai music playing and plenty of alcohol flowing freely. I was completely confused. After meeting Nang's brother, sister and parents, things quietened down quickly and people went off to bed. The next morning, I woke up very early at about 5 a.m. to a lot of noise. There was somebody doing Nang's makeup, a photographer, a monk who was blessing the house, and people were tying coloured string around each other's wrists. Apparently we were getting married. Not officially, but the Thai way, which is a religious festival, and everybody has string tied around their wrists. The whole village seemed to be popping in and out of the shack. I was told I would have to give a dowry. Nang told her father that I will be giving him 200,000 baht. I went into full panic mode as I didn't have that kind of money on me. However, I was told that there was a bank about 50 kilometers away and I could reach it before the ceremony began. I reluctantly agreed. I had a cold shower, took Nang's car and drove to the bank. I couldn't get lost, it was one straight road and they had given me directions, but in hindsight, I really wish I hadn't. Upon my return, I was paraded around the village and then tied to Nang. Well, I think it was Nang. She had so much makeup on that it was hard to tell. Not much more to say about that day except my longing to return to Pattaya. A week later, we were back in Pattaya and my current trip was coming to an end. We spoke about this and Nang told me that I could extend my visa by giving my passport to an agent to go over to Laos. I knew nothing of this procedure, so Nang took me to a shop in Jomtien that provided a visa run service. I paid the fee and the next evening I received my passport with a fresh stamp. Nang and I moved into a small apartment together. Nang went to work in the daytime and I hung around the bars on Beach Road. I wanted to get a DNA test, but I was told I would have to wait until the baby was born. On the next visit to the doctor, we were told that the baby was 10 weeks old. I thought about it again and said to myself, this baby just cannot be mine. It's impossible because of the time frame. As the female doctor spoke very good English, I explained my concerns about the baby. The doctor then translated everything I told her to Nang. Nang looked at me with a puzzled look as if she had been hurt, but said nothing back to the female doctor. I was starting to feel very emotional and I explained to the doctor that she should tell Nang that if the baby wasn't mine, I won't be angry, but it would be better to be honest with me about it because I will find out eventually. I also told her that I wouldn't leave her, but I wanted honesty. Nang insisted that the baby was mine. I eventually just convinced myself that it was. I later found out that Nang was 300,000 baht in debt on credit cards. I found this out by finding a load of receipts in the boot of her car. When I confronted her about this, she said she had tried to help her brother who had promised to pay her back. She went on to tell me that her brother's wife got very sick and medical bills piled up and he wasn't in a position to pay Nang back. This is crazy, I thought, so much money. I withdrew 300,000 baht, gave it to Nang and told her to clear all of her debt. Nang started talking about moving to the village near her parents' house, which I wasn't keen on. Nang told me that land was very cheap in her village and for about 1 million baht we could build a nice house, nothing fancy, but it would be ours to own on our own land. She also told me it would be very easy for her to find a job in her area as there was a big accounting firm not too far away from the village. It all sounded so tempting, our own dream home, Nang already has a new car and cheap living. Nang seemed genuinely happy at the thought of moving back to her village with me. The land was about 2 acres and had just been put on the market. We bought it for 700,000 baht. This was on top of the million we would have to pay out to build a house. We weren't looking to build anything too big, just comfortable with maybe 2 bedrooms. After a while, I became quite good friends with Nang's boss in the graphics company. He was looking for investors and offered me a deal that if I put 1 million baht into his company, I would have full access to all of his past orders and records because the company was doing very well. Obviously, I needed an income if I was to remain in Thailand. I discussed the prospect with Nang and we decided that I should go ahead and invest. Nang put the money into the company's bank account. A couple of days later, Nang was at work and messaged me saying her boss had asked me to come in and see him as soon as possible. I made my way to the company to meet her boss. Upon arriving, I found Nang's composure to be slightly uncomfortable. I was later to find out that Thai people don't normally like to show emotion even with their partners. There were the usual smiles, handshakes and back patting. Nang's boss told me that if he had drawn up the draft contract of the draft contract of the business arrangement and as soon as the money was transferred the deal would be done. But the money has been paid into your bank account, I insisted. He double checked his account in front of me and said no, money has not arrived. I explained to him that I had given the money to Nang to deposit into his account, so Nang's boss telephoned through to Nang's office to ask her to join us, but Nang wasn't there, which was unusual because normally in the afternoon she had to work. I didn't find it odd that she was out, as often she had to go out in the afternoons and collect money from other companies. I joined her some afternoons to do this. Nang's boss rang her mobile phone and she picked up. She explained that she couldn't talk as she was with another company boss, but she would be back soon. The boss told her it was urgent, so be as quick as she can. By 4 p.m. she hadn't returned, so I made my way back home after telling the boss that I would meet him later in a local bar with Nang. Nang came home at the usual time and I didn't mention anything about it because I wanted to surprise her later. I told her we were going out for a meal and be ready by 7 p.m. She was, surprisingly. I told Nang we were going to pop into a bar for a drink along the way to the restaurant, but I didn't mention anything about her boss, who was going to also turn up at the bar later. Nang's boss eventually turned up. We shook hands, ordered a drink and had a game of pool. He didn't say anything to Nan and she acted like butter wouldn't melt in her mouth. We all decided to have a meal in the bar and eventually the subject of money came up. Nang didn't want to discuss it, so Nang's boss took her outside alone for a quiet chat. The food eventually turned up. We all ate and then Nang's boss asked me to come to one side and have a chat. He explained to me that Nang had told him the money was gone, but she wouldn't explain how or where. Nang had caused her boss to lose face and I could see he was upset about it, as was I. It transpired later on that Nang had transferred the money to another account and not that of her boss. Everybody in the company stopped talking to her and I think she was told in no uncertain terms that she would have to leave. Nang wanted to move up north to a place which is very close to our land that we had brought. I later found out she had already arranged to rent a house there. The rent was 3,000 baht a month. It was a 2-story townhouse, big enough for a business on the ground floor. At this time, Nang was close to giving birth. Part of me still thought that Nang was suffering the effects of being pregnant, hence mood swings, and I put things down to that. But I had to persist asking about my 1,000,000 baht and where had it gone. Eventually she told me that her brother had problems and needed the money, so she gave it to him to build himself a house near Khon Kaen, about 50 kilometers further north from us. Just like that, no remorse, no understanding that whatsoever. That money was for us and our little family. Nang stopped working once we moved north. We thought about how to make money with as little investment as possible, and the idea of an internet cafe cropped up. Another 300,000 baht later and we had an internet shop. Baby Pim came exactly on schedule, or in my case 1 month too early, but she was a sweetheart. We still lived in the same rented place with the money from the shop coming in, but Nang was spending it as fast as it came in. I managed the internet cafe on a daily basis. One day Nang had enough of not working. She missed her old job and now she wasn't pregnant, decided to ask for her old job back. Luckily for her, Nang's old boss had employed 2 useless accountants who had messed up the entire company's finances, so he told Nang if she could sort it all out within a week, she could have her old job back and past events would be water under the bridge. It took Nang a week to sort it all out whilst I took care of Pim in the office here. Nang really missed work and I wanted to return, so after a chat we decided to pack up everything in our village and relocate to the internet shop to the dark side of Pattaya. The house we rented was quite big and had space for a shop to relocate the computers to. By now, the idea of building a house on the land up north was going nowhere as the money was drying up. Nang was earning 30,000 baht a month and the internet shop earned 15,000 per month. Our rent was 15,000 baht a month and the electric bill was around 8,000 baht because of all the computers and the aircon for the customers. We seemed to be struggling all the time financially. Nang would ask for money to help pay for the car again, something that got lost in translation. It was her car, meant it had just been purchased on finance with monthly installments, and the month before I met her. The monthly payments were 8,000 baht a month, which she hadn't paid for 3 months. Why not? I had a good friend come over to stay for a while. We had a spare room, so he stayed in there. One day he could see me in the shop just sitting there thinking. He came in where I sat and asked me what was wrong. He said I had changed a lot and I always looked depressed. I told him what had happened and that I just found out Nang was in debt for another 200,000 baht. Yes, another debt, and we had nothing to show for it. So where had all the money gone? I was nearly out of money, so I couldn't help. Nang showed no remorse except a bowed head when confessing. If we didn't have Pim, I really would have gone back to England there and then. My friend suggested he could lend Nang the money. I refused point blank because I just didn't trust her. Nang accepted, but my friend had something else up his sleeve. He said to Nang that if he would help this time, but if she ever lied again, he'd make her sell the land up north to get his money back. So Nang had a simple choice: never borrow money again, and she wouldn't have to pay my friend the 200,000 baht back, or if she did or lied, then sell the land up north. It took a week before another bill came through the door for something else she had bought on a different credit card. I went mad. My friend got his bank details and showed Nang the total bill was 237,000 baht, and he wanted his money back within a week. We had arranged for a seller and headed up north. The meeting was quick, and an older woman came over to the car with a big brown envelope stuffed full of 1,000 baht notes. Nang just got in the car and took it. The atmosphere was very frosty, but we soon left. I counted the money. The amount of money in the envelope was 240,000 baht. Where was the rest? This is all I could get, said Nang. You want quick money, so I sell cheap. My friend was glad to see his money. I had had enough of Nang, baby or not. I couldn't stay with her any longer. I had no money left, no options, and no way out either. I sold the computers and I got a little money for those. I kept the money and pondered my future. I had no idea where I was going in life. I might even find out that Nang had borrowed even more money. I just didn't care anymore. I took care of Pim, that was it. Nang visited her parents in their village one time. She took Pim for a visit, but when Nang came back, she left Pim up north at her brother's. What the hell was going on? What gave her the right to do that? I always cared for Pim and she came with me everywhere. So why did Nang do this? It's just another thing that they have over us Farangs. Some Thai women think of children as assets and can do with them as they please. I was furious but had no way of getting Pim back. Nang had assumed Pim to be a burden and decided by herself that Pim should be with her brother's family up north, where she would have other children to play with. I decided to leave Nang after that. I had no idea where I'd go or what I'd do, but I couldn't stay with Nang. She could just do with me what she wanted, call the police, take my kid away, lie, build up more debt, anything, and I couldn't live like that anymore. I couldn't fight her. This was her country, not mine, and besides, my visa would expire in a couple of months. Then what would I do? Nang could simply refuse to pay and I'd get deported. There were no obvious escape routes. The only way was if I did it myself. I had gotten to know lots of people, mostly through playing pool, and decided to ask around if they needed a cleaner or a gardener, just some way I could make a little money to survive. A couple of people gave me little jobs, and one of them said, there is a teacher vacancy at my school if you're interested. Well, I was, but I didn't know the qualifications necessary to teach over here. I'll introduce you and you can just make an appointment, he added. The upshot was that I got the job. I worked really hard and paid any debts off. Got a teaching and TEFL certificate. I have been at the school over 5 years now and I'm back on my feet. When Nang found out I had a good job, she tried to tempt me back by saying she'd bring Pim back to Pattaya and we could be a family again, but I declined her offer. I wanted Pim, but not Nang. I was managing to phone Pim and speak to her thanks to her sister. Nang got wind of this and threatened to take Pim away from her sister's care if she let Pim talk with him again. I'm hoping that Pim might get in touch when she's older. She didn't deserve what happened to her. Thanks for listening to what was initially a car crash story but turned out to be more of a reconditioned model. Sometimes, even if a person initially ticks all the boxes and has never worked in a bar, all might not be good. A newbie can forget to get to know the other person and not live in dreamland. I got lucky in the end. I've got a good job here and some good friends. I've met many who haven't been so lucky. This all started years ago, and YouTube channels such as yours were not about. But if they were, I'd have been better prepared. So any newbies would be well to listen to advice and the misfortunes of others. Thanks for your channel, sincerely appreciated. To many, I feel sincerely. Thank you, Nick. So there you go, guys, another car crash story, but he did well to get out of it. The only thing I'd say on that is okay, the having a child makes it difficult. What would I have done in that situation? I would have got the DNA test as quickly as possible, and I would have been out of then. I would have handled it differently. But as he said, you know, he was new to the whole Thailand thing at the time, and it's always easy to judge rather than to understand, isn't it? But this takes me quite nicely into my next story, which is short, and it's good advice for you guys to listen to if you've never been to Thailand before. And again, I'll get straight into this one. The title of this story is called Far More Trouble Than They Are Worse. Once upon a time, an Australian expat living in Pattaya just could not face the prospect of leaving the bar scene and returning back to Australia retired and poor. He jumped off a building the night he was meant to catch a taxi to Bangkok to head back home. How sad is that? The bar scene is very addictive, and the prices for alcohol are not cheap anymore. The cheap bars have average prices, especially so in Bangkok. To enjoy any female company in the bars is going to cost a hefty chunk of change in ladies' drinks, bar fines, and any other personal businesses in the room. Throw in taxi fares, a usual late night meal via a restaurant or a 7-Eleven for snacks, etc. You will be burning through the best part of £100, 4,500 baht, for the whole night out. Take the lady for a few days and costs will mount up, resulting in a drained wallet from just the one experience alone. Rinse and repeat. Always remember what Thai bar girls enjoy doing the most, spending Farang's money. To sponsor a girl to have as a girlfriend, the minimum accepted monthly amount is around 20 to 30,000 baht, about 500 to 750 pounds. On top of that, you will be paying for all meals, outings, drinks for her, laundry, taxis, etc. So add several thousand baht for all those extras as well. If she has health issues, needs glasses, teeth fixing, etc., then more expenses on top. More often than not, she will lean heavily on you when it comes to her family, especially if she has a kid back in her village, been taken care of by her parents. As a result of very basic rural village life, sickness is common and involves medical costs that are not affordable to the family. Time to dig deep. More pressure for the Farang boyfriend to help out, and who will be racked with guilt if he declines to shell out for an operation for a sick parent and they face death. No point in pretending this won't happen, because it's quite possible. There are a ton of other reasons for forking out more and more money. To add to these financial issues, the bar girls can be extremely fickle if someone better comes along. The prettier they are, the worse this is. They follow the money, and we shouldn't be surprised at that strategy given what they were doing to earn a living in the first place. Bottom line is, the Farang will end up broke, ruined, depressed, and the worst possible case scenario, feeling suicidal. There will no doubt be success stories with the ladies from the entertainment zones. Good luck to anybody that is making it all work out long term. Having said that, I reckon such a relationship is like rolling the dice against long odds. Something akin to going to a casino and dumping years of hard-earned money on the roulette wheel, then hoping the ball will land favourably. Granted, it's a loose example, but I'm sticking with it. I must confess to completely ignoring my own observations. A young lady in Cambodia melted my heart, and common sense went out of the window. I guess I wanted to touch the electric fence just to see how much it hurt. Take pity. She seems so incredibly different to all the other girls in the bar, and just for a short while, it was a terrific experience. It had to end sometime, and there is always plenty of drama involved. Hell hath no fury, as they say. I still had to endure some grief, even though she was the one who dumped me for a richer man. If you live alone, invest in a good stab vest before you dare to issue the big breakup news to your lady. One wise man that had been through the mangle dispensed this sound advice. When it comes to choosing between a woman and money, go for money every time. That way, when she leaves you because you won't invest your life savings in one of her fantasy dream world business ventures, You can console yourself by reflecting that you have lost the one item that is far easier to replace. It's hard to argue against that logic. Keep a close watch on the bank balance and think carefully through all the implications of leading a lifestyle with a lady from the bars. Most of us always stay in full financial control. Most of all stay in full financial control because nobody has much pity for broke and lonely farangs in Thailand. So there you go, the same kind of thing, isn't it? Like Emma was saying, guys, you know, the girls who work in the bars, nobody wants to put them down, but they're great fun. They're nice girls to have fun with and play these games on the bar with and everything. But they're not really for, if you go to Thailand on holiday, you're just looking for fun, that's fair enough. But if you go there with the intention of finding a long-term partner, a girlfriend, something that could become more serious, then stay away from the bars, girls. I know it's tempting because a lot of them speak really good English, and that's a real good draw, but then why do they speak in English and they work in a bar? Most educated Thai girls who speak English work for very, very good companies. And again, I'm just repeating myself. I've said this many, many times. There's now lots of good advice on YouTube, and if you're going out there for the first time, just do lots and lots of research. Right, that's it for the stories again for this week, guys. The next live stream is this coming Friday, so Saturday today. The next Friday I'll be here 9 p.m. UK time. I hope you can join me for that. It was a lot of fun last time, and that will last for about 2 hours. Come along and join in the chat. Thanks for watching again, guys, and I'll see you on Friday.